Massachusetts. Distinguished ranking members recognized for whatever questions he
Well,
cares
thank
to
you, Mr.
pose.
Chairman. And I want to agree with one thing Dr. Burgess said at the beginning of his remarks, and that is he's trying to still figure out what is in all of this, this bill that has been brought before us, which, I mean, we literally just received. The paper is still hot. It's hot off the press. Speaker McCarthy was just asked, why are members on the Republican side so, concerned or reservations about this? And he said, and he was asked, have they read it? And he goes on to say, sometimes they haven't read all the way through. Let's let them understand what it is and see where they are. So the bottom line is, I don't think anybody. I mean, there are major cuts across the board here, and I don't think anybody truly understands the impact of what these cuts will mean. But I do want to, on Meet the Press Daily, our colleague, Congressman Womack from Arkansas, was just on, and he was asked, the host asked, Congressman, we just went over some of the things in this deal that were put together to attract conservative support, the border elements of it, but it does look like it may be DOA less than 24 hours after it was announced. Some of your colleagues, Matt Rosendale, called it a continuation of Nancy Pelosi's budget and Joe Biden's policy. Marjorie Taylor Greene says it's a no. What do you make of this mess right now? And Congressman Womack's response was, well, it's an unmitigated disaster right now on the majority side. Look, I'm fearful of what this leads to. And he went on to say that he didn't even think the majority has the votes to pass this rule. Do you agree with our colleague, Mr. Womack, that this is an unmitigated disaster?
Certainly, Congressman Womack is entitled to his opinion. There's 434 other opinions or 432 other opinions, I'm sure, in this building as to what this bill is. But what I see this is a way to get to where we need to go, and that is to pass all 12 appropriation bills
well, that's not what we're
in
doing
the next
here.
30 days.
I mean, yeah, and I guess I disagree with, with one thing, the way Congressman Womack characterized it. I don't think it's just an unmitigated disaster on the Republican side. I think it's an unmitigated disaster for our country if we were to shut the government down.
May I?
Yeah.
I think what's an unmitigated disaster is what's happening at our southern border.
Yeah. Well, you're not
And we're
yeah,
continuing
yeah,
to ignore the real issue, which is why we're trying to put some policies in
and your
place to
response
address
is you
it.
cut
so.
border security money, which I can't quite get my head around. But in any event, Mr. Joyce, did you write this bill? Is this? I mean, because I'm looking at some of the things in this bill. Have you put this bill together?
No, sir.
All right. Because I mean, I hear my colleagues say that we have to be fiscally responsible. That's why these 8% across the board cuts are justified. But here's what I don't get: when you cut things like medical research on cancer, on Alzheimer's, and on heart disease, I mean, yeah, I guess in the short term you can claim a savings, I suppose, because you're cutting something. But what you're doing is you're slowing progress on research that will find a cure. If we could find a cure to Alzheimer's disease, wouldn't we all agree that not only would it be this tremendous benefit for the whole world, all of humankind, but we would save countless dollars in healthcare costs right now that we need to expend to be able to pay for people with Alzheimer's. Or if we could find more cures and more treatments for cancer to keep people out of hospitals, why don't we look at that as an investment that brings us savings? Or Head Start. I mean, 8% Head Start gets cut. I mean, the whole point of Head Start is to give young kids an opportunity to succeed. I mean, without programs like that, I mean, lots of kids would fall through the cracks. And yeah, that's a tragedy for those individuals, but if all you care about is, the bottom line, you're going to end up paying more in other programs to be able to deal with that. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, cuts in law enforcement, FBI, DEA, other federal law enforcement officers, fighting terrorism, fentanyl trafficking, border security funding, as Ranking Member DeLauro has pointed out, is cut. FAA, including air traffic controllers, Army Corps of Engineers construction activities, WIC, WIC gets cut. I thought that was, I thought we had a bipartisan consensus that WIC, you know, is a good thing, that helps a lot of, you know, pregnant mothers deliver healthy babies and, you know, young children be able to get a start. LIHEAP cut by 65%. Mr. Laura, am I right? LIHEAP gets cut by 65%?
Yes.
Does anybody disagree that these are cuts in these programs, or?
May I?
Yeah, you may, absolutely.
So we're talking about 31 days at an 8% cut, which annually is 1%. If you look at the numbers, they compare to the 2019 funding levels, which I would add was the budget
You're
that.
playing games with numbers.
No,
and the
I'm not.
idea
I'm
that-
actually
and the-
trying to
and
explain.
So wait a minute. So what you're saying here is that you would only favor a cut for 1 month in these programs, and that
What
you
I'm
would not
saying is this
support a
particular bill is looking at a
please,
31-day continuing resolution, so we
Please.
can negotiate some of
Yeah,
these
please,
issues.
well,
Let me just remind everyone that if we talk over each other, there are
I
strong
mean,
different kinks come up.
this is
So the
maddening.
gentleman will suspend. We do have to be careful not to talk over each other, otherwise a correct record of this proceeding will not occur. The gentleman from Massachusetts controls the time.
I mean, these cuts are intentional. And I don't know about, maybe, I don't know what, I mean, I've listened to all kinds of news stations, and I'm hearing the comments from your Republican colleagues who are reluctant to support some of these appropriations bills because, quite frankly, they don't have trust, you know, that you will follow through. So are you and now I guess I get it. I don't understand. Are we just doing a cut for symbolism, or, you know, to make a point, to try to get people to get on for to vote for a bill for a month, and then what happens a month later? Do people no longer want the cuts? I mean, I don't even, you know, I mean, cuts in wildfire suppression, Bureau of Indian Affairs, rural housing service and rural utility services. I mean, you know, I mean, the gentleman from Texas was going on about the high cost of energy, and yet LIHEAP, if these numbers were to hold, would be cut by 65%. Every single person on this panel, no matter what state you come from, have hundreds of thousands of constituents in your state that benefit from LIHEAP. You know, you start cutting that program, you know, there are going to be people who will not be able to heat their homes or cool their homes in some cases. I don't. And again, I guess I agree with Dr. Burgess. We're still trying to understand all of this and to do an analysis of what these cuts would mean if they were to stay in place. But we just received them, Ms. DeLauro.
I thank you. Let me just correct the record in several items here. First of all, with regard to FEMA, it's the $20 billion that is there. The $16 billion that comes out of the supplemental is not there, which is what has been anticipated in an effort to deal with what happened in Maui and other more recent tragedies. So we're not going to have enough money for FEMA. Let's take a look at border security for a moment, and I want to talk about LIHEAP. Border security, that everybody, as I said, is so very much concerned about. This is an 8.1% cut to border security. That is billions of dollars to be cut. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth and be concerned about border security and then deal with an 8.1% cut. And Congressman Joyce, who is a dear friend, we serve on the committee together, as does Ms. Bice, that border policy is not Christian. Over 11,000 Christians have signed a petition decrying the immorality of the House Republican cuts. And the cuts are repeated in the bill before us here today. Let me talk about the LIHEAP program, which, as I said, in the past, for those who have been here for a number of years and understand that LIHEAP has always been a bipartisan effort because it's cold in New England, it's cold in the Midwest, it's cold, and it's hot in some places. So LIHEAP, it's understandable that people want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to be able to survive. So this bill funds LIHEAP at an annual level of only $1.4 billion. Problem. It was a $4 billion program last year. We passed a bill last year for $4 billion. LIHEAP allocates 90% of its funding at the beginning of the fiscal year, I might add, and October is a critical month for the LIHEAP program. Last year, LIHEAP set its allocations to each state and for the tribes on October 20th, as states need the funding of the beginning of the fiscal year to be able to prepare for the winter. By the way, the 90% allocation for last year totaled $3.4 billion. And even if LIHEAP could allocate 100% of the amounts provided in this bill, that would only be $1.4 billion. It's a 65% cut. It's not 8.1% cut, because you've disregarded what happened in the bill and in the budget that we are currently in this year, which has provided that money. You just eliminate $2.5 billion, you leave the balance, and then you cut it by 8.1%. Think about it. As Congressman McGovern said, read it closely. It is disastrous. And I don't believe anybody wants to see disastrous. But that's what this is all about. And this notion, I just have to, that this is either a 1% cut or 31 days. Congressman McGovern pointed this out. What happens at the end of 30 days? We are not going to have 12 individual appropriations bills at the end of 30 days. It takes a good 6 weeks to put these bills together. So that means that we are going to continue these cuts into a next 30-day a continuing resolution, and on and on and on, until we can get to a point where we are sitting and talking about what we did last December when we came together, Democrats and Republicans, to put together a bill that crossed the finish line on being able to fund the government. And I would just say on that issue that House Republicans decided not to participate in that process a year ago in December, but Senator Shelby, Senator Leahy, and myself hammered out a bill. We compromised. Everybody did not get what they want, but we got the bill done, and it was a good bill. Again, one other point, a 1% cut is misleading. There is not a single program, not a single program that is cut by 1% under this bill. They are cut by so much more. And if you take a look at the bill, page 6, line 11, it reads, reduced by 8.1285%. That is an 8% cut to every domestic program outside of the Department of Veteran Affairs. It is really, it's almost ludicrous to think, and on the issue that you talk about is border security, that you cut border security by 8.1%.
And, let me just say, I genuinely mean this. I think, Mr. Joyce, if you and Mr. Lauro got in a room, you could work out a bill that would probably get 300 votes.
I think it's fair to say that all appropriators working in together.
Yeah, well, I'm just, and Ms. Bice, she said the magic word. She said, to negotiate. To negotiate with who? I mean, Democrats haven't been asked to be part of any negotiation. Senate Democrats haven't been asked to be part of any negotiation. Senate Republicans haven't been asked to be part of any negotiation. The right wing is negotiating with the far right wing, and guess what? It isn't working. Newsflash, this just came on, Representative Good announces he is a no. So now I think the count is up to around 17 no's and some undecideds as of now on this. And so, I mean, are we going to, the Rules Committee is becoming a place now where we bring these things, we report out a rule and we schedule a time to go to the floor, and then they pull it at the last minute. You know, and I don't know if that's going to happen here, but as of right now, and maybe because people haven't had time on your side to read all the stuff in the bill, but a lot of the Republicans that I know, I mean, they are strong supporters of medical research and Head Start, and they believe in, you know, WIC, and they support LIHEAP because their constituents benefit from it. They support the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and I mean, that's not where I mean, you want to make cuts, these arbitrary kind of across-the-board cuts, they're mindless. I mean, you do hearings on all these programs, and you decide where you think there can be savings and where there needs to be increases or where things can level off. You evaluate each thing line by line to go in and these, you know, everybody's going to take this cut, with the exception of, you know, the Pentagon and Veterans Affairs. I mean, it is so, I know, I know my Republican friend, I know many of my Republican friends know we can do much, much better. And I find the cuts in this to be offensive. I really do. And I find them to be counterproductive, and if they were to succeed, and if they were to be instituted for the long term, which I would believe they would if this is the way we're operating now, constantly going to the right, to the right, to the right, you know, it would mean a slowdown of progress in medical research, and it would mean more and more expenses in our healthcare system. And we would not save money. We would be actually, you know, we would actually be continuing to accumulate these huge bills. But I'll just close by saying we're getting to the point now. I mean, we were all home over the weekend, and I got to tell you, you guys aren't running this place right, and people know it. People see it, and you know, and by the way, not just Democrats. I mean, Republicans. Like, why can't you get together and keep the government running? Why is keeping the government running such a huge deal? Why people just don't get it? We can negotiate things, by the way, in ways that I won't like everything in the bill, and you won't like everything in the bill. But that's the way we've always done it. And at the end of the day, you can get a bill that passes overwhelmingly, or we can continue this madness, which is taking us nowhere. I mean, this is going nowhere. We all know that. I'm not even sure we're going to get a vote on this. But in any event, I appreciate everybody being here. I mean, no disrespect to anybody, but I've had it. And I think a lot of my constituents have had it, the American people have had it. They just want us to get the job done. I yield back.
Chair, thanks, the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Minnesota.
Thank you very much. That was an incredibly dramatic reading of all of the cuts that are 30 days. Mrs. Bice was